Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I am Sean Feeney, one of three, I think, hosts today, and I'm joined by...
And I'm Wendy Haddad. I think I'm the second of the three caballeros, and I'm joined by...
Ken Aguilard, and we are on the Low Code Approach. It really whips the llamas.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Ken, for taking us in the Wayback Machine. I appreciate that so much. But let's talk a little bit about the future. And to talk about that, we're joined today by Emma Cooper, Principal PM Manager at Microsoft. How are you today, Emma?
Hi, folks. I'm doing good. Yeah, I guess a little more about me. I'm a Principal PM on the Power Apps team here at Microsoft. And so my role on that team is to look out for authoring experiences, all those makers and developers, enabling them to build apps better with productivity and also to make them of higher quality.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining, Emma. Really appreciate it. And I think I said we're going to talk a little bit about the future, and I think that's pretty synonymous with one word: Copilot. And I'm going to pose the most basic question to you right now. What is Copilot and how does it work?
That's a great place to start, Sean. Copilot is the term that Microsoft uses for its generative AI experiences that help with folks' productivity. So that's in the general term what it's used for. Now, the way in which Copilot shows up is in a few different places. So a lot across the Power Platform, you have the concept of Copilot helping makers and developers, build better, build faster, build with higher quality. And so kind of like there's Copilot that helps accelerate your development in Power Apps and Power Automate and so on. There's also Copilot experiences that are kind of more ingrained to help you generate text, such as deployment notes or app descriptions and so on. So kind of supporting over the overall experience. And then there's Copilot that's just available as a part of the applications. So users who are using apps can also leverage Copilot, as a part of just performing the process or app that they're using. So it's really, we have the generative AI for, makers and developers, and generative AI for kind of like our admins and overall kind of like quality process that support things that make it easier to manage. And then there's kind of the generative AI and Copilot capabilities for people who are using applications as well.
Well, let's double click there for a moment, because we talk a lot about personas and the kinds of makers and developers. And I think Kartik says everybody's a developer. We had Jack Robotham on the podcast who said everybody's a maker or a problem solver, I should say. But regardless of your philosophy, we do have people who are in the pro development role. And so is Copilot for those individuals as well? Are they just for these quote unquote citizen developers or business makers who are solving personal problems? How can Copilot be used for the more technical challenges?
So I think it is for everyone in the way that, the promise of the Power Platform is to democratize development for new makers. It's also a promise of increased productivity for pro developers as well, right? It doesn't just help new folks go fast. It also helps, folks who've been around for a while go faster as well. Like that's the general idea. And you can see this in the fact that, let's take the simple example of importing Excel files and like copying and pasting and importing data. That is something that as a part of pro development role, your test data and everything, typing all that out, copy pasting it over, getting it into like a structure that works, like that takes a ton of time and, might not be a great thing for pro developers they might not enjoy it or want to spend that time. And so having Copilot be able to kind of natively import that Excel file, into a Dataverse database, for example, like that's a great productivity win for a pro developer as well. While the citizen developer may, not know all the steps involved in it, definitely will help them go faster, be more successful. That's fantastic, but it helps our pro developers go faster as well.
So I think that's a really good example. I do a lot of training and consulting with our customers. And another thing that I've seen a lot of is it's not replacing that pro dev or developer skill, right? And so if you understand how data works or how an app should be built, you can actually write a better prompt to be able to craft things and correct things better, especially I think about Power Apps, right? and how you can describe it to design it and build the data model. And if you understand the basic principles, it actually can take you further and allow you to scale, because we already know there's developer shortage in IT organizations. And so it's a really great tool to help developers move faster, as well as kind of helping kind of shape those best practices. I was doing a demo for people who are brand new to this whole idea of development and generative AI. And what was beneficial there is I love that the apps are automatically responsive. Put those best practices in place for them so that they can actually begin using these apps in production capacities if they need to. And so it's a great example of how it's helping both there. But Ken has a question.
Emma, do you want to respond or comment on? And
I mean,
what
absolutely
Wendy said?
plus one. Like, the idea is that, the saying goes, rising tide lifts all boats. That's the intention here. And I think, as more capabilities, roll out, it'll only benefit the developers who are, working on the platform.
So, Emma, yesterday I was actually with customers, and one of them raised this really interesting point. And they said that they were working inside of Copilot, building an app, so Power Apps Copilot. And last month, they asked Copilot to help them with a question, and it wasn't able to. But yesterday, when we were talking with the customer, we tried it again, and it worked. So that begs to ask, how are we training the models? How quickly is Copilot learning? How fast is it evolving? And maybe a follow-up, can a customer train the model, or is it we're the ones training the model themselves?
I love this question, Ken, because we actually didn't get to the how does Copilot work part of the start of the show. And so let's do some Copilot basics. So basically, the models that are included are what are called pre-trained models. The models that are used in a lot of these experiences are the Azure OpenAI service models that are what they are. And what changes is what context and instructions and prompts that Microsoft helps, support, add to the model. So to break that down a little further in how that would work. So we have our AI model, we send it a prompt to it, and then it gives us back, the response. So a very basic version of that, if we just, as Microsoft standalone, we send your user input to the model and back. So if you were add a screen to the app in our Power Apps scenario, we could just send that prompt to the model and send it back, but it might not be of the best quality. We can improve it through things like giving it a task description, saying, okay, you're going to add additional content to this application and take into account the user input that they give you. Also be helpful in your responses, say when you don't know things. And so we can craft the prompts to be better at that. You can also include things like examples. So this is a great example of the code structure that should come back for how you should add a screen. And we can include those examples to make the prompts better so that the model will give us a better response. But ultimately, the model's not changing, right? That's why you hear GPT-3, GPT 3.5, GPT-4, that's when the model changes. But behind the scenes, it's a pre-trained model. We just change and evolve our ability to give better instructions and also, for example, take into account your context, because that's the other part that really can improve the outcomes. Context might look like, for example, when you go and just type into the ChatGPT website and type some stuff, if you get in the further in the conversation, it's clear it feels like it knows who you are, but that's because they actually feed your chat history and last user input into the prompt that they send to the model for the next query. So it feels very personalized because they add that context into the prompt, but the model is not actually changing or evolving. So that's kind of, a common misconception, I would say. And because previously a lot of the models that were used all had to be fine-tuned models where it had to learn and you had to add a lot of context, and it evolves as we go. But in this new age with the new models that are available, the pre-trained models have gotten good enough where that's not necessary. So that's kind of the how does it actually work? And then to your second question around, can I train it? Can I make it better? Can I actually, if I want to, give it my context to make it awesome or even more awesome than it is today? And right now, the Copilot behaviors for makers and admins or so on are currently locked down by Microsoft, because there's a lot of risk in opening that up, because we want to maintain kind of our responsible AI and security principles for that. However, for our kind of end user, I want to include generative AI inside of my applications and automations. That's where folks have, a lot more power in order to go and augment and adjust what context, add additional plugins, add things, into the what's called like retrieval augmentation. So say the model doesn't have the context that you need, you can actually tell it to go, hey, go check this website, check this content, use this to also base your answers off of. That is something that you can also go and adjust as a part of the Copilot that you would want to build, or the generative AI capabilities that you would want to build yourself and include for your users.
I feel, Emma, like I've just graduated from Copilot 101. So maybe...
Congratulations.
Thank you. So maybe on to Sean for Copilot 105, 102, or perhaps 200.
Thanks, Ken. I kind of want to take a blend of a few of the questions. You touched on a little bit about how the models train, how can we make the experience better for the end users? And Wendy discussed a little bit earlier about how she was doing a training session for app design and how Copilot helped assist with not enforcing, but helping implement best practices for app design. Now, as somebody who's new to Power Platform, or maybe somebody who's experienced or kind of ramping back up maybe for Power Platform, does Copilot, by enforcing those best practices for you, remove a foundational layer of understanding for application design? So like, the analogy is, do I need to know long division anymore, or do I just bust out a calculator and just have it do it for me? Because I don't need to show my work anymore, right? So is Copilot the new calculator?
I love that comparison, Sean. I think that's really great, because I think it's actually accurate in some ways, and also Copilot is different in others. So with a calculator, you are all still in charge of all of the outcomes that come out of that calculator, right? You're the one putting 1 + 5 into the calculator and ideally knowing that you should get back 6. Even though it does that work for you, in doing the calculation, and it definitely, I don't even remember the last time I did long division by hand. You still have, because you learn some of those fundamentals, you learn what outcomes to expect from it in order to evaluate it. And I think for Copilot, is there a need to have some kind of understanding of, what should come out of it? I would say, yeah, that's why it's a Copilot. It's because, it shouldn't be unsupervised, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's the same idea, like, inputting, what I would expect to have happen, and then I'm going to get a response, and I need to also understand if that response is reasonable. If I typed into a calculator 1 + 5 and I got back like 10,000, I might be like, that seems suspicious. But, building out the applications, I should still have a general sense of, even in my, description, what a reasonable response should be, right? If I go and say, go and add a new button to the screen, and it, comes back with something completely different, like, I should be like, like that doesn't quite make sense. And so I think, like, there's different altitudes of fundamental understanding. Like, I would say, like, for the most part, like, we do need that supervision that is there to have the outcome be what you expected. But also, do I need to actually go get a degree in Power Platform in order to use Copilot? No, that's not the intention, right? It can help with those best practices, because even if you think about, I'm trying to go and build a responsive app, doing that on my own, I'd probably be less successful. Maybe even like, if I didn't go and read up and sort through the best approaches, I might be making a bunch of mistakes as well. But by leveraging Copilot, it could get me further of the way there. So I think like there's kind of like a balance that is there, I would say, for sure. And then I think the other interesting thing, like with the calculator, it actually hides, like, it doesn't actually show you how all those steps in the long division, right? It's kind of just you input the numbers and it gives you the response. And like I think across the Power Platform and at Microsoft, we're trying to be more transparent than that, right? Like, for example, in Power Up Studio, which is like, that's the one I'm most familiar with since I work on it, we actually show all the steps that are involved. So if I gave a prompt like add a gallery and a form and connect it to data and, go add a submit button that connects to the form, like if I did all that, we break it down step by step to tell you all the different things that we did so that you have the power to like get that extra level of visibility to go and review all those steps as well. So yeah, I think I love that example of the calculator, Sean. I think that's great.
I'm going to jump in and stick with the theme of mathematics right now. So in mathematics, we actually have order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, of course, addition and subtraction left to right.
I wasn't expecting to go back to elementary school math in this, but here we are.
You never know what you get with us, right? That's kind of how we roll. But you touched on some very excellent points, which begs the question, is there an order of operations when you're using Copilot? Do you start with Copilot? Or can you use Copilot with an existing app and then look at enhancing something? I'm a new maker or I'm an existing maker. How should I perhaps be using Copilot to enhance my productivity?
Yeah, that's great. And I think the answer is Copilot can help with, every aspect of the application journey. Right on the homepage at the top, if it's available in your region, it's right there at the top for you to go and input your query to get started. So definitely as a way to explore what the platform has to offer and to, get a tailored solution for your scenario. Getting started with it is a great way because you can start with a simple query, and be guided through kind of that process to see how it works. Now, also, I would say for existing applications as a maker, you can also leverage it there as well. It's available inside of the studio experience where you're used to working. There's capabilities that are there for you to go and change the layout, ask questions. And then there's also kind of the ability to go and actually generate code for like sort and filter expressions and so on, right in line as well, available as, you go through your experience. So there's almost like an element of progressive disclosure, right? Like if you're working on a gallery that needs sorting, like you see the option to go like input your natural language to go write a sort and filter expression as a part of your editing experience. So I'd say like, both for new creation, for editing, it can also be helpful and you can kind of discover along as you go. I think one good thing to call out is there's actually a Copilot and AI learning path available that was, I think, just created, a couple weeks ago. Like that kind of gives a good overview of a lot of the capabilities. So I don't know if it's a part of the podcast, we can include that link somewhere that folks can go see. But I would say like, all parts of the journey are good to leverage.
I'm going to put you on the spot with a fun question here. I'm assuming that you've built apps for your team or for your business and you're using this. So what is your favorite thing that you've maybe when you first started testing it or playing with it, your team brought it to you that you created with Copilot in the Power Platform?
Oh, I love that question. So I would say that I love the ability to create net new data structures through natural language because I think lots of people love that kind of like data modeling aspect, but I think being able to short circuit the, clicking and adding the new types of columns and making sure they're of the, texts are texts and dates are dates and so on. Like I find that all really tedious. And so just being able to describe the actual like data scenario that I'm after and like, augmenting as well via natural language. Like, I need another notes column and it knows to make it multi-line text and everything. Like, for example, we had like a scenario for tracking a couple of different like stuff that we're shipping in our team. And so like made an app to help with that and like being able to actually just do that via natural language on the fly. I find a great satisfaction, especially since I know how long it takes to do it manually, that I can just get it done so fast. So that was great.
Awesome. Hey, so I know things are moving really, really fast in Copilot. Are there any other really interesting integrations with Copilot amongst Power Platform or maybe the Microsoft stack that you think people should know about? And maybe, touch on a little bit of that developer experience where they can integrate Copilot further with some of the tools that they're already working with.
Absolutely. So one of the I think, more interesting things, and this was talked about at the Microsoft Power Platform Conference, a little while ago, is the ability to have a Copilot for your end users over your data as a part of your applications. Now, that's really interesting because it essentially means that you could go have a Copilot for all of the apps and different processes in your organization to have that, helping hand go and, support folks doing their role as a part of the digital transformation that they're participating in. Now, to go and change and augment that is really exciting because you can leverage all the power of Power Virtual Agent. So there's kind of the out-of-box kind of Copilot control that you can just kind of add and hook up to your data in a couple websites and it's ready to go as a part of Power Apps. But then you can go customize it further with Power Virtual Agents, basically getting full control over the Copilot behavior. This is interesting because you can go and craft custom topics that you would want to be able to cover. You can feed it that additional context of URLs or documents or other things that you would want it to have as a part of the process. And then you can also go leverage things like, plug-in actions and running flows and automations as a part of that Copilot experience as well, which takes it from just simple question and answer over kind of like a database or websites and turns it into, I can actually take actions and get stuff done as a part of that Copilot as well. So I definitely like the moment you say like, what are interesting integrations and how can people work on it? Like that's where my mind goes because that's super powerful in being able to have that Copilot for anyone using an app and being able to customize it for your business, for your processes, leveraging the rest of the platform. It's definitely mind-blowing.
Agreed. That is so cool. Ken, I think you have a question. I see you pacing, anticipating a great question.
I am, Sean. And as just, I have a lot of customer conversations. And one customer, I remember, was saying, okay, Clippy has now become sentient. Right? And so it was a great laugh on the call and whatnot. But they then said, how do they, within their own organization, ensure their employees that they're not going to be replaced in this AI revolution? One of our responses was, the team that was on the call, that Sean, as you said, with the calculator, it's a tool. It's there to help you. It's there to enhance. It's not sentient Clippy. Emma, what kind of guidance would you give to customers who maybe fear Copilot in maybe that aspect, that respect?
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. I think, with new technologies that come out, there's always, fear and uncertainty that go along with that. And so I think, it's okay for folks to question it coming out. But I would say at the end of the day, this is not the first kind of technological advance that we've had that changes the way people, approach their jobs. There's been kind of a lot of different evolutions. And like the example that I would love to kind of point to is, Excel used to be done by developers via command line, which is hard to think about these days, right? Like it seems like that was ages ago, but it used to be people's full-time jobs to go do all of those calculations in Excel. And then obviously we know now, like Excel got a great kind of table UX. There's like 1 billion people who know how to use Excel now. What happened to all those developers whose full-time jobs it was to go do command line stuff in Excel? Well, basically they took their skills and applied it to other areas that was more impactful for their business, right? Like instead of doing that rudimentary work, they were able to take their skills and apply it in better ways for the business. And I think in general, it wasn't a bad thing that their jobs changed in what they looked like, because it empowered a whole heck of a lot more people, the fact that this technology went in and evolved. However, their ability to go take their skills and focus it elsewhere is a great opportunity for their business and for themselves and their career as well. I also think we've seen customer examples as well, where when there is digital transformation in the process and there's productivity improvements, enabling them to take more time with customers because they have to spend less time on their tools, and so on. Like a lot of that is net benefit and net, a good thing for those individuals who are working and leveraging the new technologies.
And that was a brilliant response inside of there. I would also like to just quickly comment and remind folks, if you know Excel, that Power Apps and Power FX is actually based off the Excel language. If you know how to use Excel, you have a great head start on using Power Apps. Just a little tidbit of information inside of there for you.
Emma, there's so much more we want to dive into, but we're running short on time, Emma. And I'm going to tease. We've talked a lot about what is Copilot on the Power Platform, how you use it. A little teaser for our next episode, where we're going to talk a little bit more about the governance and the privacy and security side of it. But Emma, as we think about just the future here with Copilot, you've mentioned one resource, but anything else you'd add that we should be directing our listeners to as we land the plane?
Yeah, there's more guidance coming out. I would say definitely starting with, if you're wanting to learn how to leverage Copilot, going and starting with the learning path on learn.microsoft.com is great. We'll include that link. And then there's a bunch of other great documentation and a couple different videos that kind of go over that experience, as a part of the Power Apps blog and the Power Automate blog. Lots of good resources there as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Emma, so much for joining us. We'd love to have you back again and would like to hear more about the new announcements coming up about the Power Platform and Copilot.
Sounds great. Thank you all.
Bye now.
Thank you, Emma.